I'm going to tell you something most people my age are too proud or too afraid to admit. I did everything right. I followed the rules. I chased success exactly the way the world told me to. And at 70 years old, I woke up one morning and realized I had built an entire life that looked impressive from the outside, but felt completely empty on the inside. Not broken, not tragic, just hollow. The strange thing about emptiness is that it doesn't scream, it whispers. It sits quietly in the background while everyone congratulates you, while they clap, while they tell you how lucky you are. And you smile because you don't have the courage to say, "I don't feel lucky at all." I wasn't always this honest with myself. For most of my life, I was what people would call dependable, responsible, focused. I built a career that paid well. I raised a family. I paid every bill on time. I stayed out of trouble. I made sacrifices, the kind of sacrifices people admire, especially in men my generation. I believed in stability. I believed that happiness was something you earned later, after the promotions, after the mortgage, after the kids were grown, after retirement. There was always an after. I remember being 35, standing in my kitchen early one morning, tightening my tie while my coffee went cold on the counter. My son was maybe 5 years old. He was sitting at the table coloring something. Dinosaurs, I think. He kept trying to show me his drawing. I nodded without really looking. I told him, "That's great, buddy. Daddy's late for work." I still remember the way he hesitated before lowering the paper. Not crying, not upset, just quietly accepting that my attention had an expiration time. Back then, I told myself I was doing it for him, for our family, for our future. That's the sentence that built my entire life. I worked late. I missed birthdays. I skipped vacations because deadlines didn't move. I told my wife, "Next year will be easier." I said that sentence so many times it became background noise in our marriage. Next year. I chased promotions like they were checkpoints in a race I never signed up for, but couldn't figure out how to quit. Every achievement came with a moment of pride, followed almost immediately by a new expectation, a new goal, a new level I had to reach. And every time I reached one, the satisfaction lasted less time than the last. But nobody talks about that part. They celebrate the house, the car, the job title, the retirement account. They don't talk about how success can slowly replace your identity until you don't know who you are without it. By my mid-50s, my children had grown up into adults with lives of their own. They loved me, I know they did, but there was a distance between us that felt polite, respectful, careful, like they didn't quite know how to reach me, and I didn't know how to reach them either. My wife and I had become experts at discussing schedules, bills, and grocery lists, but beginners at talking about feelings. We weren't unhappy, that's the dangerous part. We were functional. Comfortable routines can hide emotional silence better than conflict ever could. By 65, I retired with what most people would call security, the kind people dream about. No financial fear, no job stress, a respectable reputation, a retirement party where colleagues shook my hand and thanked me for my dedication. I remember standing in that room, listening to speeches about my discipline and leadership, and feeling strangely detached, like they were describing someone I used to know. I smiled. I thanked them. I went home carrying a watch they gave me as a retirement gift, engraved with my name and the number of years I had worked. 42 years. I placed it on my dresser that night and stared at it longer than I want to admit, not because I was proud, but because I was trying to calculate something that didn't have numbers. How much of my life had I traded for something I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore? Retirement is supposed to feel like freedom. That's what everyone says. But freedom is terrifying when you don't know.
In the weeks that followed, I started noticing something I had ignored my entire life. Silence. Not the peaceful kind, the revealing kind. When you spend decades filling every hour with purpose, deadlines, and responsibilities, silence feels unnatural. It leaves space for thoughts you've been outrunning your entire life. I began waking up earlier than usual, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my mind refused to stay asleep. I would sit at the kitchen table before sunrise, listening to the refrigerator hum and the faint ticking of that retirement watch sitting on the counter. Time had never sounded louder. One morning, I caught myself staring out the window at nothing in particular, and a memory surfaced so clearly it felt like it was happening in front of me. I was 42. My daughter had a school play. She had asked me to come weeks in advance. She even handed me a handmade ticket she had drawn herself, crayons, glitter, careful handwriting that spelled my name wrong but felt more valuable than anything I had ever signed at work. I remember promising her I'd be there. That afternoon, a client scheduled an emergency meeting, important, high stakes, the kind of meeting that could shape careers. I told myself missing one school play wouldn't matter. Children forget those things. Success was about long-term security, not small moments. I sent flowers instead, a big bouquet delivered to the school with a card that said I was proud of her. That morning at the kitchen table, 30 years later, I realized something that felt like it knocked the air out of my chest. I couldn't remember what the meeting was about. Not one detail, not the client's name, not the outcome. But I remembered the disappointment in her voice when she said, "It's okay, Dad. Maybe next time." There is no next time in childhood. That's the part nobody explains when you're busy building a life. Moments don't wait in storage. They expire quietly while you're planning your future. That was when I finally understood the lie that had guided my entire generation. The lie I repeated to myself so often it sounded like wisdom. I have time. It sounds harmless, responsible, even. It feels like patience, like discipline, like sacrifice for something greater. But it's one of the most dangerous sentences a human being can believe, because it convinces you that life will pause until you're ready to live it. Time doesn't pause. It replaces. Parents become memories. Children become strangers with familiar faces. Marriages become partnerships built on logistics instead of connection. And the cruelest part is, none of it happens suddenly enough to alarm you. It happens gradually, politely, almost respectfully, until one day you realize you missed the life you were working so hard to protect. I started seeing my achievements differently. They didn't disappear. They just lost their weight. The house I was proud of suddenly felt too quiet. The savings account that once represented safety now looked like numbers. I traded birthdays for the career title that impressed people at dinner parties sounded like the name of a role, not the person I actually was. One afternoon, my son visited. He's a good man, responsible, hardworking, in many ways. He became exactly like me. We sat on the back porch talking about his job, his responsibilities, his deadlines. I watched him check his phone 3 times during our conversation. I recognized the behavior instantly. It was like watching a younger version of myself sitting across from me. At one point, he apologized and said, "Work's just been crazy lately. You know how it is." I did know, and that frightened me more than anything, because I realized something in that moment that felt almost unbearable. I hadn't just lived that pattern, I had taught it, not with words, but with example, with absence, with priorities that quietly told my family what mattered most. I wanted to tell him to slow down, to be present, to choose differently. But advice from a father who missed half your childhood sounds hollow, even when it's true. So instead, I asked him how he was really doing. Not his job, not his schedule, him. He hesitated. He looked surprised by the question, like it was written in a language he didn't practice often. Then he said he was fine. I recognized that answer too. After he left, I sat there for a long time, thinking about how icy love can exist without connection, and how dangerous that distance can become when it feels normal. The shift in my life didn't come from some dramatic transformation. I didn't sell my house. I didn't travel the world. I didn't reinvent myself. I simply started paying attention. And that turned out to be one of the hardest things I've ever done. I began calling people without a reason. Not holidays. Not obligations. Just to hear their voices. I visited my sister and stayed longer than was comfortable. Long enough for real conversations to happen after the small talk ran out. I started sitting with my wife in the evenings without television filling the room. At first it felt awkward, like to strangers politely waiting for something interesting to say. But slowly, stories began to return. Memories we had never shared. Fears we had both hidden to protect each other. One night she asked me a question I wasn't prepared for. She said, "Where did you go all those years? Even when you were right here?" I didn't have a good answer. The truth is, I went where approval lived, where achievement felt measurable, where I could control outcomes instead of facing emotions I didn't know how to handle, and saying that out loud felt like confessing a lifetime of quiet mistakes. There's something I want to ask you, and I want you to sit with it for a moment, even if it makes you uncomfortable. If your life continues exactly the way it is right now, your priorities, your routines, your distractions, your excuses, where will your relationships be in 10 years? Not your career, not your finances. Your relationships, who will still feel close to you, and who will only remember the version of you that was always busy. I'm not asking that to judge you. I'm asking because I wish someone had asked me when the answers could still be changed more easily. By the time most of us recognize what truly matters, life has already collected its payment. And life doesn't offer refunds, only reflections. Here's what I learned too late, but not too late to understand. People don't remember how hard you worked. They remember how present you were. Love is not measured by sacrifice. It's measured by attention. And time is not something you manage. It's something you spend. Whether you mean to or not, I used to believe meaning was something you discovered after achieving enough success. No, I believe meaning is something you create by deciding what deserves your attention, while you still have it to give. These days, my life looks smaller from the outside, fewer obligations, fewer accomplishments people can list. But inside, it feels fuller than it ever did when I was chasing milestones that moved every time I reached them. I notice laughter more. I listen longer. I say things I used to postpone because vulnerability felt inefficient. I tell my children I love them in ways that are probably clumsy and overdue, but honest. And sometimes, late at night, I still sit with that old drawing my son made, not as punishment, as a reminder that success without presence is just a well-decorated absence. I don't know how much time I have left. None of us do. But at my age, the horizon feels closer, not frightening, just clearer, like reading the last chapters of a book you once thought would never end. If there is one thing I wish I understood earlier, it's this. Life doesn't ask whether you're ready to experience it. It simply keeps moving, quietly replacing chances with memories. You don't need to change everything tomorrow. Grand reinventions are often just another way of avoiding honest reflection. But you might want to ask yourself, what parts of your life are you postponing until you feel safe enough, successful enough, or free enough to enjoy them? because safety, success, and freedom have a strange habit of moving further away the closer you think you are to reaching them. I spent 42 years building a life that looked secure and nearly forgot to build one that felt meaningful. If my story means anything at all, I hope it doesn't inspire you. I hope it interrupts you just long enough to notice the moments quietly waiting for your attention right now. Not someday. Not after the next promotion. Not when things slow down. Now, while the people you love are still here to notice you noticing them, the watch from my retirement party still sits on my dresser. It still ticks every second like it's counting something important. These days, when I hear it, I don't think about how much time I've lost. I think about how precious the time is that still remains. And if you remember nothing else from my voice after today, a full calendar is not the same thing as a full life. And one day, when the noise finally fades, you will not wish you worked more. You will wish you had been there more. Before you leave, I want to ask you something simple. If this story felt familiar, if even one memory surfaced while you were listening, take a moment and sit with that feeling. If you believe more people need to hear truths like this, quietly, honestly, and without noise, consider subscribing to this channel. Not for me, for the reminders we all need, but rarely hear. And if there is someone in your life you've been meaning to call or spend time with, share this video with them. Not as a warning, just as a gentle nudge that time is moving. For all of us, you can also leave a comment telling me one thing you wish you had done sooner, or one thing you refuse to postpone any longer. Someone reading your words might find the courage they need. Thank you for spending these moments here. Take care of your time and the people who share it with you, because one day, these quiet moments will be the memories that matter most.